With the new season just dropped, there are a lot of weird changes across all types of heroes and compositions, shaking up the meta just a bit. But are the overpowered tanks still the same, and how are the weaker ones doing? Especially now with some incremental changes to Ramatra and Wrecking Ball. Let's take a look at the tank tier list for the start of Season 7. If you want to get better at the newly made better tanks, make sure to use the link in the description for a GameLeap membership. There are tons of guides from different experts all updated for the newer patches when they drop, including ones for the 100% value meta mainstays and even the weaker, more strategy dependent ones as well. Make sure to take a look if you want to grind up the ranks and enjoy the video. At no surprise to anyone, Roadhog is still at the bottom of the list. Orisa changes haven't been nearly as impactful to give him some breathing room in the meta. He's not even realistically that strong against Ramatra, who will be seeing some more play in the meta despite his large hitbox. The Roadhog rework is definitely still looking good, since it's focused on making his presence much better, at taking and contesting space, and with a new ability he's likely to actually be able to tank at all in the first place. He's still a strong pick with some of the more newer heroes, like Kiriko and Iliari, who are able to do damage at the same time as having burst heal and cleanse to save the Roadhog from the classic anti-heal counter. He's definitely pretty difficult to deal with sometimes, but even though he can be kept alive, he can't hold space reliably on control or flashpoint maps where the points are less committed. He's an F tier, but expect to see him skyrocket upwards, even if just for a couple tiers when the new rework pops in during the mid-season patch. Next up is D tier, with Wrecking Ball, who is tragically still low tier. His fire rate spread buff not doing too much to help with his weaknesses, and his greatest downfall isn't even getting countered, but the fact that he can't secure kills on his own against most support lines in the game. Ana and Brig both handle him easily, Baptiste has the Immortality Field and Regen Burst all while damaging the ball, making his engage far too long to get any value, and even Iliari has her own boop to get space away from him and a pylon that has to be killed to get the pick. His gun isn't really the problem in his kit, since even if it keeps getting upgraded, there are just way better tanks to deal consistent frontline damage without having the hitbox of a massive sphere. Blizzard definitely has to cook some other stuff up to make him better, since even with Sombra's rework, he's not looking too hot right now, even on her side. Similar to Roadhog, he's definitely still playable, but even heroes that don't directly counter him simply outperform him in the frontline. One of the things that makes Roadhog and Ball weak right now is that they simply get obliterated in the frontline, either by other tanks or by high damage DPS. Because a lot of damage heroes have either mobility or self-peel, it's pretty rare to find a solo kill as a tank with just your damage, and Ball is one of the hardest to play because of that. His spread buff and previous reload buff will still help him play to build his minefield more against hostile team compositions that prevent him from engaging too often, and well-placed minefields are still one of the best solo carry plays you can make, so he's still got a bit of a lifeline even with the new Sombra running rampant against him. For C tier, we've got the classic wholesome Winston, who benefits a lot from Sombra's resurgence, but is also still hampered by the high damage Bastion and even Torbjorn, along with both Diva and Jungle Queen remaining strong picks. Playing him requires a lot of experience to consistently get wins, since it's pretty easy to both counter him and keep your team composition solid and structurally sound. You don't have to flip your whole composition on its head to deal with him easily. He's still a top 3 pick for maps like Dorado and Gibraltar with a lot of high grounds, but even so it's really rough to deal with the high peel and high resistance from the stronger damage and support heroes right now. So without a good Sombra duo, and hopefully a really good Ana player, it'll be a rough go at the current season. He does have some luck in heroes like Ramatra and Sigma being stronger, since he doesn't get completely demolished by them, being able to avoid them both feasibly and even at times help to focus them down with his bubble to block healing. Their maximum damage isn't too high, so Winston's big hitbox doesn't suffer too much. But for now, you'll still need a crazy Sombra to one-shot your targets one by one, or Winston will quickly fall behind, being way too easy to poke out pre-fight and kill him and his bubble during the engage. Next up is Reinhardt, who's got similar weaknesses to Winston in his limited health pool, but he's definitely still buffed up from his previous changes, particularly his shield health. Even though he can be slowly burnt by some of the stronger compositions, he's still got great synergy with the ever-strong Symmetra and Bastion, but you'll definitely need a Lucio as well, and that puts Reinhardt in a weird spot, since in the right comp he can absolutely dominate lobbies, and on a lot of different maps as well, but without it, he's really only good for just contesting point for a long time. His Earth Shatter is still a great tide-turning ultimate, so he's definitely a hero with a lot of ups and downs, but the end consensus is that in the right composition, he's truly unstoppable, but without it, he's a lot more mediocre, but still better at contesting space through sheer damage mitigation and healing provided by his supports than the other tanks below him on the list. It's a good spot to be, meaning teamwork and strategy can make him really strong, but without it, he's a lot more boring and a lot less effective. Now for B tier, which is definitely strong by all means, but tragically Zarya is at the bottom of it, having been way higher at the top before. Zarya's bubble changes were what made her truly strong, along with a solid base damage that was just waiting to be unleashed when the rest of her kit became good enough to keep up. With almost all of her buffs reverted, she's similar to Reinhardt and Winston, needing a lot of teamwork to do her job, meaning a lot of games with the subpar teammates will start to really sting compared to before. Her bubble health decrease isn't the biggest deal in terms of her damage absorption, but the extra 5 charge she received whenever her projected bubble was broken was a really good boost to her energy reserves, which are hard to keep up against teams intentionally not feeding her and waiting to take advantage of the lapses between her bubble cooldowns. The size of the bubble was also underrated in helping build extra charge on teammates that weren't necessarily going aggressive. Once again, we have a tank who seriously relies on good teammates to be effective, and while it's not bad to be supported by equally good teammates, being unable to do anything without them can make you feel pretty hopeless in the more difficult games. She does still have strong peeling, with her bubble being a great tool to soak damage and turn it on the opponent with good precision, but not all team compositions focus on going in all the time, with more defensive and spammy compositions with a lot of support sitting far in the back poking away being more and more common. Next up is Doomfist, who's still got a power spike from his slam and block changes helping him stay relevant. He's a good flexible tank, with great single target damage and area of effect poke, a pretty weird strength to have but really effective at building ultimate against compositions that stay stacked. Even though Sombra will give him a hard time, especially with her hack speed being increased, he actually has the tools to chase her down pretty effectively, so the matchup is more advantageous for him if he finds her in the mid-fight, since she now has a 0.25 second window every time she tries to escape where she can still take damage. But outside of that, he's still got a decent matchup into the rest of the tank crew, and Orisa being a bit weaker definitely helps. Even though she's basically as strong, her being nerfed and other heroes being buffed will make it more enticing to stop playing her, since most of the compositions she's good in are pretty boring and have a low skill ceiling, meaning that if you actually are trying and sweating super hard, you'll be able to beat her outside of the mirror, and not just with Doomfist either. He remains a great pick, but still counterable and on some maps, simply just not good enough. Since having walls to pin people into with your punch is actually really important to unlock some of the more clutch parts of his kit. To finish off B tier, D.Va is firmly at the helm. Not just staying strong, but Zarya, her classic arch nemesis being nerfed, makes it that much harder to contest her health pool in the neutral. When it comes to dive maps, she definitely has both a lower skill floor and high skill ceiling, being able to single-mindedly just focus the other tank, and on the other hand, also able to mastermind manage your backline, keeping them alive at every hint of pressure, as well as melting the front line, contesting objectives, and diving key targets at the right time as well. D.Va simply can't be lower because of her maximum potential, and she's not really that hurt by the top heroes either. And even if some maps make it difficult for her, the fact that she's a dominant hero on the high ground based ones, or even the longer range ones with a lot of open space, where supports like Ana can sit far in the back and safely heal D.Va across that insane distance, makes her a top pick in the tank category. Now for someone who's really received a bolstering to their skills. It's Ramattra carrying A tier with his new Nemesis form upgrade, but just like Zarya, he was just waiting to have his potential unlocked by a small boost to the rest of his abilities. He's a solid hero, difficult to force out because of his Nemesis form, and now that he has it more often, he can swap from defending corner to corner to attacking corner to corner much more. His Omnic form is definitely slept on, but his Nemesis form is obviously his big breakout, throwing out completely unblockable punches at a solid range and having a 75% damage resistance ability on no cooldown. He's the epitome of an offensive and defensive tank, swapping between the two in more ways than one. So his Nemesis form cooldown has been buffed, but his Omnic form is also great for applying pressure outside of the fight, poking better than most other tanks. Timing his shield is also a key skill to learn. It can get a lot of value with the instant addition of 1000 HP to the middle of the fight, since it often just won't get broken at all. Blocking heals and damage, it can also be used flexibly, once again adding to the fact that Ramattra's range as a tank is just enormous, so it's definitely worth polishing up on his mechanics and game sense. Timing your Nemesis form and shields to move from corner to corner and cover to cover, contesting the objective better than anyone else. Now that all sounds great, but the reason he isn't in S tier is because his Nemesis form is still really easy to counter, with just raw damage being one way. Tanks who can do a lot of close range damage will really just need one more hero on their team focusing Ram to slow him down. The burst damage you receive with your big hitbox can be really surprising as well, so if you plan to run him this season, make sure to respect that you might just be a little bit less durable in your Nemesis form than you think. Now for the big beast at the bottom of S tier. Orisa is still a champion at the top, with only a measly 5% reduced from her fortified damage resistance. She's one of the heroes that can counter the new and improved Nemesis form from Ramattra in two ways, with both raw damage and her stun that pushes him back as well as leaves him vulnerable to damage without being able to block. Zarya being worse also helps her out, since a high energy Zarya could definitely give Orisa a tough time holding space, almost always forced to use Fortify if caught off guard. Orisa is still top tier thanks to her tank countering ability, similar to how Roadhog is good at farming heroes like Winston and Ball despite not being amazing himself. But Orisa's staying power is what takes her above just beating up the other tanks for their lunch money. Her Fortify not being nerfed enough is a good enough reason to keep playing her, since she really is that strong. And even with Roadhog reworks coming in, his self-heal will stay similar, meaning Orisa is pretty key to stunning him out of it when the mid-season patch eventually comes through. But for now, Orisa is still a great all-rounder pick, only realistically countered by the next tank on the list, Sigma. Sigma's had a breakout performance since his effectiveness was proven in pro play for the Overwatch League playoffs, and he's definitely been picked a lot more in ranked. Even though he has a great matchup into Orisa, the go-to pick for lower skilled tank players, he hasn't seen much play to beat her until now, mainly because of the base skill level you need to be effective with him. His strengths remain the same, just finally realized in the spam meta and even in a brawl meta with his quickly deployable abilities and solid utility. A stun, a reactive shield to block abilities, and an infinite damage absorber is a lot on the same character, and with high burst damage too, it's definitely worth getting good at him for the upcoming season. He's also got a lot to gain from Zarya's nerfs, and even Ramattra is pretty manageable since it's almost impossible to miss your incretion on him in his enormous Nemesis form. He's got some weaknesses on close range maps, but even some classic brawling maps like King's Row have enough long sightlines to make it easy to drag fights out into the open. So even maps where he doesn't seem amazing have great options for him. So it's definitely worth trying him out all over the place. Finally, the top of the top. Junker Queen lives up to her name, thanks to her competitors being nerfed and even the tanks she's good into being played more often. Ramattra and Sigma both have different weaknesses into her, but are mostly based off of not being able to deal more damage than her self-heal, being mostly unable to block the ability either during the Nemesis form or whenever you have no accretion available. It seems like a lot of heroes are getting advantages because of Zarya's nerfs, and Queen is no different, having one less hero to cleanse her anti-heal on her ultimate. Queen is also pretty flexible, having her shout ready to go at all times but not needing to use it because of the strength of her shotgun, having the most ammo she's ever had, and her knife dealing the most damage and healing it's ever done. It's a great poke phase for a normally close-range hero. She's in a great spot and always has a way to win a match with raw skill. But make sure to check out the GameLeap website if you want to truly master her, where I've uploaded a recent masterclass guide on getting the maximum potential on her easily counterable ultimate, as well as VOD reviews going over how to truly boss up, especially in the mirror. That's it for the tank tier list, which has quite a bit of small changes, but we'll have to trust the mid-season patch to really shake things up, throwing heroes like Roadhog up into the top and maybe actually dropping Orisa down a peg. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.